Imagine for a moment that the voice you hear inside your head, that internal dialogue that defines you, no longer belonged to you. That it became a chorus of strangers, critical and threatening. That mirrors reflected faces that weren't your own, and that shadows on the wall whispered conspiracies against you. This is not the plot of a horror movie. This is the daily reality for millions of people trapped in mental mazes with no exit. Today, you're not just going to see a list. You are going to enter 5 parallel universes of the psyche, 5 mental illnesses for which medicine still has no cure. You will walk hand in hand with geniuses, artists, and iconic figures who, behind their public light, fought private battles against the most insidious demons. Let's begin. Schizophrenia, the labyrinth of divided reality. Our first stop is the realm of schizophrenia, a word that evokes madness, but which actually means split mind. It is not multiple personality disorder. It is a fracture of perception. The person loses the boundary between the real and the imaginary. Auditory hallucinations are the most common. They are not just voices. They are complete narratives that insult, comment on every action, or give irrevocable orders. Delusions take over logic. The conviction of being pursued by an omnipotent organization, or that messages on television are directed exclusively at oneself. And to exemplify it, there is no more illustrious and tragic case than that of John Forbes Nash Jr., a mathematical genius whose life inspired a beautiful mind. Nash, at the peak of his career, began to perceive secret patterns in conspiracies where others only saw numbers. He believed he saw coded messages in newspapers, and that a secret government was recruiting him to save the world. His mind, capable of solving theorems that defied science, was also his prison. He lived decades alternating between moments of lucidity and periods dominated by his delusions. A living testament that the illness can coexist with genius, but at a devastating human cost. Another case, even more tragic, is that of musician Peter Green, co-founder of Fleetwood Mac, whose schizophrenia, aggravated by LSD, led him to believe he was possessed by a demon and to completely retreat from fame and fortune, living in absolute poverty for years. A bipolar disorder, the fire and ice roller coaster. Now, bored in emotional roller coaster where the peaks are euphoric and the valleys, abysses of darkness. This is bipolar disorder. In the manic phase, the brain ignites like an overpowered engine. Energy is infinite. Ideas flow at such speed, it's impossible to follow them. Grandiosity inflates the ego to the point of believing oneself invincible. Disastrous financial decisions are made, impossible projects are started, and sleep seems a waste of time. But what goes up must come down. And the fall is the deepest depression, a winter of the soul where energy vanishes, hopelessness is total, and the simple act of breathing hurts. Actress Catherine Zeta-Jones bravely made her diagnosis public to destigmatize the illness. Following the intense care of her husband, Michael Douglas, for his cancer, she faced her own internal enemy, being hospitalized for treatment. But history is full of these forced travelers. Vincent van Gogh is perhaps the archetype of the artist tormented by what was then called acute melancholy. His periods of frantic productivity, where he painted masterpieces one after another, alternated with deep crises of despair that led him to self-mutilate and finally to take his own life. His genius and his torment were two sides of the same coin. Borderline personality disorder, skinless. Imagine that your skin does not protect you, that every comment, every glance, every small rejection feels like an open wound. This is what it's like to live with borderline personality disorder, BPD. It is instability personified. Relationships are intense and chaotic, idolizing someone one day and hating them the next. Self-image is a broken mirror that constantly changes. The fear of abandonment is so visceral, it can provoke desperate and manipulative behaviors. And the emotional pain is so unbearable that self-cutting, self-harm becomes an unhealthy method to release the internal pressure. to feel something different from the psychic pain. Princess Diana of Wales is perhaps the most famous example. Her public battles with bulimia, her confessions about her marital unhappiness, and her suicide attempts clearly pointed to an undiagnosed BPD. She described a deep inner void and intense emotional ability that made her feel tremendously alone, even surrounded by crowds. Amy Winehouse, the talented singer, also showed many signs of this disorder. Her stormy relationships, her self-destructive addiction as a way to anesthetize unmanageable emotional pain, and her recurrently written phrase in her diaries, "I love you till death," reflected the intensity and despair characteristic of BPD. Frontotemporal dementia, the stranger who bears your name. Of all the illnesses, this is perhaps one of the cruelest. While Alzheimer's steals memories, frontotemporal dementia destroys personality. It corrodes the regions of the brain responsible for judgment, empathy, and impulse control. The person you knew slowly disappears, and in their place emerges an impulsive stranger, socially uninhibited, who may make rude comments, act inappropriately, or become cold and indifferent to the pain of others. The most documented and heart-wrenching case is that of novelist Terry Pratchett, creator of Discworld. Before his diagnosis, Pratchett was known for his sharp intelligence and wit. The illness, however, began to cloud his prodigious mind. He himself described how it affected his writing, his ability to find words, and most painfully, his essence. He became a fervent advocate for the right to die with dignity, fully aware of the shadow looming over him. Another case is that of Bruce Willis, whose recent diagnosis has shed public light on this devastating condition, showing how an actor famous for his charisma and action can be reduced by a disease that silently erases who he is. Severe obsessive-compulsive disorder, a prison of rituals. Finally, we enter an invisible prison, built with rituals and intrusive thoughts. Severe OCD is not about wanting things tidy. It is a mental tyranny. They are terrifying, recurrent thoughts that burst in uninvited. Did I leave the stove on, and will my family die? Did I get contaminated, and will I make everyone sick? The only way to calm the cataclysmic anxiety they provoke is to perform a compulsion, washing hands until they bleed, checking the lock 50 times, counting to a safe number. It is an infernal cycle of doubt and temporary relief. Comedian Howie Mandel is an open example of this struggle. His OCD and fear of germs are so intense that he popularized the fist bump instead of the handshake. His life is meticulously organized around his rituals to avoid contamination. In a historical case, magnate Howard Hughes succumbed completely to his severe OCD. One of the richest and most powerful men in the world ended his days as a ghostly recluse naked with long nails and hair down to his waist, obsessed with germs, isolated in his sterile hotel room, controlling every aspect of his environment to calm the anxiety that ultimately consumed him. And this leads us to the uncomfortable reflection, the controversial element we promised. We live in an era that promotes mental awareness, but is our society truly equipped for chronicity, for permanent care? We quickly medicalize passing sadness, but do we have the patience, resources, and compassion to support those whose minds cannot be fixed? Or deep down, do we prefer stories with happy endings and look the other way in the face of suffering that has no cure, that demands unconditional love and support day after day without the promise of a miraculous improvement? If this journey to the frontiers of the human mind has moved you, made you understand, or you simply want us to continue exploring the mysteries of psychology together, your action now is vital. This channel is built on your curiosity. Please like this video, subscribe, and hit the bell so you don't miss our next content. And most importantly, go down to the comments and tell us which of these stories impacted you the most. What other illness do you think the world needs to understand better? Your voice is essential in this conversation.